talking about the selection tools in Photoshop. In particular, we're going to be talking about the rectangular marquee tool and the elliptical marquee tool. Pretty basic selection tools, but there are several different things that you can do with these that are quite unique. When you want to go in and create a selection, and you want to be able to section out something and not use any of your lasso tools here in order to get kind of a freeform selection, I'm going to jump over to the rectangular marquee tool. The rectangular marquee tool allows you to simply go in and put a selection around something. So if I wanted to take this section of watercolor painting and use it for a website, I could just simply draw a selection, and then I could copy this or crop the image to this size. What I like about the rectangular marquee tool is up in the options bar here, we can set this in a few different ways. So the normal mode means that I can simply take my rectangular marquee tool and create a selection however I want to draw it. I could also do a fixed ratio. And a fixed ratio is nice if I want to go in here and do something, say I'm doing something with a 6:9 ratio. I could simply put in width of 6 and a height of 9. And this is going to be a fixed ratio. So when I go and I create my selection here, it's always going to be that 6:9 ratio. No matter what size you make it, it'll always be that ratio. So I could go in and crop an image, or I could select a section here, always following that 6:9 ratio. The other thing is going in and doing a fixed size. A fixed size is fantastic, especially when I'm doing little snapshots. So you're doing headshots. And I'd like this to be the same size. I don't want to have to draw my selection tool. I just want to click on something and get that size. And I can put in any type of measurement that I want here. If I'm dealing with millimeters, I could go in and just simply type in 20 millimeters. And so if I type in 20 millimeters here and hit return, I can go directly to my image, click on that, and it's going to give me that size, which is wonderful because I don't have to worry about, okay, is this the right size based on what I'm trying to do? Did I draw it correctly? So nice features with going in and being able to grab those different styles here: normal, fixed ratio, and fixed size. Now, what else would I use this for? Well, I do use it for going in and applying different selections to a background, or being able to fill something with a feathered background. Here I've got an ice cream cone, and what I'd like to do is create another section inside this layer here that's going to be kind of this lighter color pink. So I'm going to grab my rectangular marquee tool, and I'm going to draw a selection behind this ice cream cone. Now I'd like to fill it with this medium pink here, but I'd like to soften this selection. I'd like to feather this selection here. What I'm not going to do is set the feather here in the options bar because I don't know what it actually looks like. So with my selection active, I'm going to go to my select and mask, and in the feather, I'm going to feather this out, which is going to basically blur or feather the edge of my selection. And the reason why I use my select and mask is because this shows me exactly what it's going to look like when I go back and I apply my color to the selected area. And I want a very soft edge here, so I can fill this with that medium pink and have it blend into the background very nicely. So I'm going to click OK. Now you'll notice the selection, it lost its square edges here, but the selection doesn't have the ability to show a feather. We need that select and mask to show how soft edge of a selection that is. So with this softer selection, I'm going to use my eyedropper tool, which is the letter I. I'm going to sample the color. I'm going to be on that correct layer. There we go. I'm going to sample that color of the ice cream cone. Always make sure you're on the layer you're trying to sample from. I'm going to go back to my layer where I'd like to apply that color to. And I'm going to apply the color inside my selection, because remember, selections isolate. So whatever inside the selection I can affect, whatever outside the selection is left untouched. Now my quick little shortcut to fill my selected area with the foreground color is going to be Option or Alt Delete. And do Option or Alt Delete, and it simply fills it with that color. Of course, I'm going to go into Select and choose my deselect, which is Command D. So this gives kind of a cool little glow behind there, like it's being backlit. I'm going to do this one more time, but I'm going to do it slightly smaller. And so I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to do a selection here. I'm going to go back to my original ice cream cone, and I'm going to use my eyedropper tool, the letter I. I'm going to sample a lighter color. Basically, I'm creating like a stack of colors behind this. So with this lighter color, I'm going to go back to my layer, and I'm going to go back to my selection tool, click the Select and Mask, and I'm going to feather this selection, so it too can be a nice soft edge selection, and I'm going to click OK. And now, with this current feathered selection, make sure I'm on the right layer here, because one thing about selections simply exist. Whatever layer you click on is what layer that selection is going to affect. Some people think that I did a selection on this layer. Well, the reality of it is I can turn off all the layers and the selection still exists. So a selection technically isn't done in a layer. Selection is simply created, and then whatever layer you have active is the one that it is going to affect. So with my soft edge or feathered selection on my background layer and my color that I've chose in my color picker, again, I'm going to use my Option or Alt Delete, and I'm going to fill that. And if I do this a couple times, do my Option and Alt Delete a couple times, it will keep filling that repeatedly until I get this kind of backlit effect. I'm going to turn my selection off using my Command D. And that's another way you can quickly use your rectangular marquee tool. Now, the other tool that we have nested in with the rectangular marquee tool is the elliptical marquee tool. And it's great for selecting circles or ovals. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to select this plate. Now, I could use my object selection tool. I definitely wouldn't use my polygon lasso tool because that's a lot of clicking going on around here. So I'm going to use my elliptical marquee tool. Now, when you're drawing with the elliptical marquee tool, you'll notice that you can create an oval. But if you hold down your Shift key, Shift is going to constrain so that it is going to become a perfect circle. But what's tricky about this is that trying to get this perfect circle here without having to redraw it every single time, and you find out it doesn't work. Well, there's a trick to drawing a circle, and what you have to do is this. If you want to create a circular marquee around an actual circle, I'm going to go into my View menu. I'm going to turn on my rulers, which is going to be Command R. And from those rulers, I'm going to grab my cursor and I'm going to pull a guide down to the top of my circle. And from the left-hand ruler, I'm going to pull a guide out from the left of my circle. Now, if I was drawing with a rectangle, this would make total sense. Of course, I would start here with my rectangle, and I would draw all the way over to the edge of my plate here and down if this were a rectangle or a square. But because I'm going to be using my elliptical marquee tool, I'm going to go ahead and start in the same place because it's basically the same concept. So you'll see what happens when I put my cursor here. And all I'm doing is putting my cursor where the top of the plate meets and the left of the plate meets, and I'm going to pull that cursor and come all the way down. Now, once I park my cursor on the right side of the plate in the bottom, you'll see I'll get a perfect circle. Okay? Now, you don't need to do these guides. You just need to understand that's where you're going to start from. And then you've got a perfect circle. Now, if you want to make sure it's a perfect circle, just hold down your Shift key. So now I've gone in and I've created my circular selection. And I'm going to zoom in really close. And I notice that that's like 1 pixel out at the top. I'm going to zoom in here and it's like, okay, that looks good right there. And on the right-hand side, I could go in a little bit right there. And on the left-hand side, I could go in a little bit. So 3 sides are good. I want to show you something cool. I'm going to go into the Select menu, and I'm going to transform the selection. Now, when I transform the selection, it may look like we went under the Edit menu and did the same thing like here, doing Free Transform. This is not the same. I'm going to stop this for a second. If I go into the Edit menu and I choose my free transform, I'm going to end up transforming the pixels. That's not what I want to do, okay? What I'd like to do is I'd like to simply transform the selection without transforming any of the pixels. So when I go into the Select menu and choose Transform Selection, I can now go in here and I can now tweak my selection basically one pixel at a time without having to keep redrawing my selection every time that I need that. So that way I can get that just right and get it inside the plate. And then, just like my Transform tool, I either need to double click or click Return in order to set my selection, my transformation. So this allows me to transform my selection without grabbing the pixels and actually transforming the pixels themselves. I really like this feature. Now, I'm going to deselect this because there's one other trick here that is basically beyond what most people would use this for, but I like to show it anyway. So instead of coming up here where the top and the edge meet and starting at this virtual point and pulling down and creating a selection for the plate here, what I'm going to do is start in the middle. If you hold down your Option or your Alt key, this will allow you to draw from the middle. If I also introduce my Shift key while I'm drawing, I can draw from the center using my Option or Alt. Holding down the Shift key will constrain it to a perfect circle. Now you'll see that I didn't get it quite in the center here. So here is a super trick. While you're holding down your mouse and your Option or Alt key and the Shift key, tap the space bar and hold the space bar, and this will allow you to move your selection around while you're doing this. Let go of only the space bar, keeping your mouse and your Option key and your Shift key held down. Introduce the space bar whenever you want to move that selection around. Now this is a very complicated step, so you have to use your Shift, your Option, and your space bar, which requires a lot of contortion with your fingers, as well as holding down your mouse as well. Now, it's not something that you're going to use all the time, but you know what? It's just one of those tricks there in Photoshop that we have that you can use. And there's lots of these little hidden gems in there. So if you ever want to go in and create an elliptical selection right there, this is how you'd go through and do it.